Welcome to In This Moment. I'm Janet Stovall, DEI strategist, joined by organizational culture expert Khalil Smith. We tackle the urgent questions in management and inclusion, exploring what's next and what you can do about it today. We're so glad you're here with us. Let's dive in.
So today we're talking about something that's happening across corporate America, the increasing political pressure on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, and how smart organizations are adapting their approach to protect and advance this important work.
Business, the bottom line, those are the things that in the for-profit world we talk about. Social justice, not so much. And so companies that focused on social justice for all their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts and the right thing to do, they were the most vulnerable to the backlash. But using business foundations, the performance foundations, the things that matter to the business world, those things are harder to disrupt. The difference is not the work. It's how you have to talk about it.
And we brought in the right person to talk about it. So Andrés Tapia is a global diversity and inclusion strategist. He's the author of 6 books, and he's got a 7th book already on the way. He's helping organizations and has been helping organizations around the world navigate this challenging environment while maintaining their commitment to inclusive excellence.
And he has a very clear message, which we think you'll hear in this discussion. But the battle over the traditional DEI language and the way it's done, we've lost that battle. The core work, however, of workforce optimization and the things that matter to business, that still continues. It's about strategic repositioning, not about giving up.
Yeah, and he calls it same work, different words, right? Moving from diversity to workforce optimization, from social justice to business performance. And so we are super excited to have this conversation and to welcome Andrés to In This Moment.
Andrés, we're thrilled to have you with us. And so we're just going to dive right in. Let's start, like we always do, with the big question of what's next. What do you see coming down the pike for organizations and individuals in the next, say, 24 months?
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say hello to you, Janet and Khalil. Thanks for having me on your show. I'm really excited about this important conversation. Let's start with a big question, right? We're definitely in a crisis. It's one that is not going to let up. It's going to be one that is only going to intensify. And I think as we have this conversation, I think we're going to look at various things. So what is the actual problem or threat and consequences? What are the things that actually we may have to mourn being lost? Which are the things we're going to have to maybe let go of strategically or out of careful wisdom and deliberation? But also, I don't want to leave it there. I think we can have a conversation about what are the new opportunities. So, in working with many D&I practitioners as well as executives who continue to be committed to the cause of a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable environment, what are we seeing? We're seeing that certain aspects of D&I have been criminalized or will be criminalized, which means that people could go to jail for certain things just because they have been declared illegal. Now, one could debate in the courts or even in philosophy or constitutional law, but I'm talking about in the process, these are real threats that have to be taken seriously. So, there's a certain category of items that clearly have been declared off limits from a legal perspective. There are other things that fall in the gray area. We don't know if they fall because the law is also about interpretation. And that's why there's suits and court, and lawyers on both sides. So while some things are clear cut, not eligible for action on, other things there's uncertainty about. But and we can come back to that, Janet, Khalil, and talk about what those might be. But even the gray area carries threat because you might make a bet that, that won't be declared illegal, and then the interpretation goes the other way. So you have to tread carefully. Then there's certain things that have not been addressed by the current situation, in terms of trying to dismantle it, that could. And so what are those things that still are not out of bounds, but could become on the sites? And the final thing is, what are the things that really, no matter how you look at it, there's certain ways of talking about some of the aspects and outcomes of the work that really, I believe, not only could survive but thrive.
Well, when we did our intake conversation, one of the things we talked about a lot was one of those things that probably we can say has gone away is the concept of D&I for social justice. Now, we can argue as to whether or not it was actually really there, but it certainly was post 2020. A lot of what people talked about when they talked about D&I that had moved into that space. So, what about companies that actually built their efforts around the concept of social justice? What's going to happen to them?
Yeah, and if I could back up just a tad and look at what were the intended outcomes, and then we'll then come back to what you're saying about on the
Okay.
basis what, like social justice. The desired outcomes were to have more diversity at every level in an organization, at the leader level, in the pipeline, and then in the middle management, and then even at the entry level, new hires, right? So that just from a straight out outcome perspective, that was the desired outcome. And so how to go about it? Now, a lot of D&I practitioners made the case from a social justice perspective that it was the right thing to do. It was an equitable thing to do. It was the American dream or constitutional implementation thing to do. And it has its merits. We know that social justice, for many of the listeners and those of us here, is something that really gets us up in the morning and we could call it the driver, right, for the work, wherever our work happens, whether nonprofit or government or education or corporate. But the problem that has always been there, and I had always worried about it, and I know you all have too, is that in the corporation, and I'm going to make a distinction between the corporation and the nonprofit or government or education. So put those aside. But in the corporation, was that the best philosophical foundation on which to go after the objective of diversity at all levels? And could we have gone after diversity at all levels under a different philosophy that wasn't social justice? And I'm making a distinction between social justice as a personal driver and social justice as a foundational premise for the work. And I believe that social justice, a foundational premise of the work, is a legitimate foundation in other arenas where social justice is the foundation, not only for D&I, but it's the foundation for the work. So in a nonprofit, social justice organization or civil rights organization, or even a social services organization where we're seeking equity, and social justice is the currency of that organization and its culture, and therefore it makes sense to use it as the foundation for other things, including D&I. But where do things get off alignment is in the corporation. Because social justice has never and will never be the currency of the for-profit organization. And it's in the name, for-profit organization. That is its mission. And now, if social justice can help it become more profitable, well, we've seen over time the argument that, hey, doing the right thing is doing the right thing for business. But those two things are not always in alignment. There was a time when a lot of consumers and the mainstream market was saying, hey, we want companies that have certain values and we will buy from you and not from them. And so that was, you could say, the social argument imperative of equality, inclusion, kind of served the purpose of the for-profit. But it was temporary, it was situational, it was due to the gestalt of the culture for a variety of different reasons. And so today we're seeing the inherent weakness of using social justice to drive a business imperative, because now these things have separated, where, doing the social justice thing is not necessarily the best thing for business. From a business perspective, I'm not talking social justice perspective or philosophy or democracy. I'm just saying in the political environment, in the current consumer environment, we're starting to see that CEOs are going, embracing D&I for the sake of equality is going to get us in trouble with the law, or we're going to lose business just from a B2B or B2G, business or government perspective, or even in some segments, B2C in some segments. So they're like, I can't make that argument anymore that equity is going to be good for business. All right. And for your listeners, I'm not making that argument, right?
You're like, don't look at me. Don't shoot the messenger. I do wonder, to Janet's point, as you think about kind of 24 months out, and you've spoken about kind of this weave and this flow that sometimes these things are in vogue, then they go out of vogue, then they're back in vogue. We as consumers, to your point, no judgment involved. I, as a consumer, am sometimes quite fickle. And so there is I can envision a moment over the next 24 months where we go back to, you know what? Yes, it's important to turn a profit because you need to keep the organization healthy and thriving. And yet I do once again care about how you're treating your employees and your community and, all of the constituents that are impacted by your organization. So do you see some of those organizations that Janet is talking about that were making a bit of a social case? Because I don't know very many that said, forget the business, this is only good for society. Most of them were doing kind of a buy one, get one free. This is good for our communities in which we operate, and it makes us more money. Why wouldn't we do both of these at the same time? And now they're kind of extricating that and saying, well, let's not talk about the societal benefit. Let's only talk about the business. It feels like, based on what you're saying, some of that may come to bite them in the butt to a degree.
Well, yeah, and it's all about how you go about it. So let's keep exploring this, right? Because we're looking from a diversity, inclusion, and equity perspective, we're looking for how to do it in a sustainable way. Because take away the current threats. What has been the history of D&I for the last generation or two? Up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Remember, flavor of the day, it's on and off, on and off, on and off. So that tells us that the fickle consumer or even the fickle CEO or C-suite, they've ridden certain trends. But D&I should not be based on trends. It should not be based on popularity. It should not be based on sort of, what is hot and what is not. And business always runs trends. It always is. I mean, that's sort of, you're chasing the opportunity. So to have said that it was made as a business case, it was a good business case until it wasn't. Right. And then it became a good business case until it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so I think we were all, even before the current crises, we were all tired of the flavor of the day accusation, but it was true because it was not sustainable. Right. So I think coming back to, I don't want to leave the listeners in hanging as well, if you don't base it on social justice, what do you base it on? And so let's come back to that. And I think that there's a sustainable argument to be made in what I'm going to say right now.
Well, I do definitely want to come back to that because I think that's a big question. You said something really that resonated with me. You said, business runs on trends, and that's just what it does. No matter what it is, everything's a trend. What are some of the things, but there's some things I believe that are foundational for business that aren't trendy. The question is, how do you make D&I not trendy? I can see that it shouldn't be. I mean, we can say that it shouldn't be because we say you should embed it. That's how you do it. You make it not trendy because you get it embedded. But how do you get people to get away from thinking it's even a trend so they can get to the point that they embed it? How do you make...
Before you answer that, Andres, I am curious if either Janet or Andres, what are those things that you would say aren't trendy in business? Because I feel like if you look at operations, it was Six Sigma and lean, and then that went away. If you look at marketing, it was digital marketing and consumer marketing, and then that kind of, so I feel like in so many instances, folks are saying, my budget goes up, people pay attention, then something else is the flavor of the month, flavor of the day, then it's back in. So is that just the nature of business, that things are trendy? And to the extent that you can, Janet, you've talked a lot about systems, right? Mm-hmm. How do you weave it into the system while it's really important so that it's harder for it to go away? It just doesn't get the same level of attention when it's not trendy.
Yeah.
I will say, to answer that question, then I'm turning to Andreas to see.
Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of among the many things that probably aren't trendy is this. You need good people, and you need people who are the best at doing whatever it is that needs to be done. Now, before computers, that was one of the things you can say that could be a trend, so, but that's the truth. That's sort of the base. You need people who can help you deliver the best to the population or the customers that you want. What irks me is that if you accept that diversity is destiny, then yes, having a diverse population of people should better prepare you to do in the future, just like you would getting people who understand AI. There is something, and we had this discussion with another guest, there is something about diversity that, and I have my opinion as to why, but there's something about diversity that it defies logic. The logic says you should value this. Valuing people is a basic need in business because you need people to get it done until you don't, I guess, until AI takes it over. But you still need some people to do something. Then you should want the people that are best able to help you compete, to satisfy customer needs, and ergo, the world's becoming more diverse. Ergo, you should want more diverse customer base. But something about that logic just doesn't go.
So Andres, help us pull this apart, because you kicked all of this off. You're talking about the trends and the future and all of it. And you have a point of view here. You've written multiple books. You've consulted with lots of organizations around the world also. Because Janet and I also always talk about, like, yes, there's a lot going on in the U.S. These are also global conversations. So what wisdom can you impart to help us move this conversation forward?
Yeah, I want to go back, Khalil, to your question about what are the things that are not necessarily trends, right? Or is it all a trend in business? And I'm about to get my degree I'm about to get my MBA degree. And so I've been in the study of that for a year and a half. And obviously I've been in business and consulting with CEOs all this time, but, I felt it was time to just kind of, get that final credential there. And, it doesn't change. What's not a trend in a for-profit company is for-profit is always a trend.
Yeah.
So what is a trend is the marketing or what you're selling or not selling it or how you're selling it and all that. But in the end, all those decisions are based on what will make us the most money, right? So that's not a trend. And that's what I'm going to come back to. If we base the work that traditionally has been done to make sure we have the representation of the best talent wherever it may be found in every level of organization in an inclusive way, is like, rather than basing it on the currency of social justice, is to base it on the currency of the for-profit corporation, which is profit. And so I believe that we can make, and we should be making the case on that foundation. I'm happy to unpack that with you.
I'm with you 100%. We know that has been my platform forever, despite the fact that some people will push back and say that sounds like exploitation.
And that was going to be my question, because, again, I think, there's a lot of alignment here, and I'm sure there are folks that are listening, and we always try to do our best job of kind of representing some of that point of view that may not be, one of the three of us. And I appreciate, Andres, you were even saying at the beginning, this is not my point of view, but I want you to know, ... There are, increasingly, and you see these trends, to your point, across generations, younger folks, remove the labels from it, but younger folks tend to be a bit more idealistic. They want change in the workplace. We see that every time. You can go back and look at feedback that the baby boomers were getting when they were first entering the workforce and talking about, free love and so on and so forth. But when you're younger in your career, a simply for-profit message doesn't resonate in the same way in a lot of instances. And marry on top of that some of the kind of, income disparities that have been created from folks that are at senior levels of the company that are like, great, you value me because I can help you make more money, but I don't necessarily share in that to the same degree. So have you seen organizations that have made that narrative that it's not about social justice? It is. And again, as we think about what's next, that some companies will have to pivot into this space to make that case, but do so in a way that brings people along, not, Janet, to your point, makes it feel exploitative, like, yeah, I'm here, I'm going to make you a bunch of money, but I still can't afford my rent.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear, this is not a case for unfettered, unchecked capitalism, which is rapacious. And the whole history of capitalism is one of generating inequality, generating environmental damage, generating products and services that actually damage, kill, make people sick. I mean, there's a whole history of it. And therefore, there has been a counter, like regulation and in environmental law and, wage and in labor laws, right, is to mitigate it, because if capitalism is led unfettered, it leads to a lot of these things. So we know that. Now we flip it. But capitalism has also been responsible for producing some of the greatest innovations of humankind that actually extend life and make us live longer and better lives. And better products and services to make life easier, more creative and more productive and more fun and all those things. And so it's a beast, if you will, that has both virtues and, let's call it the evil aspect of it. So
you mean it's
I
complicated? There's
recognize
no
that.
simple answer here, Andre.
No,
Nuance. We talk all the time about nuance.
but for those that choose to work for a corporation, we have to accept that we're going wide open into the belly of the beast. And there's these two aspects of it. And I'll speak for myself. I understand that. And I could be doing all social justice outside corporate, but I chose to be a corporation. So I'm my paycheck is coming to them. So I'm benefiting from this system.
Mm-hmm.
So but my social justice driver says, is there a way that I can bring my skills mindset in a way that helps highlight the virtues that do exist within capitalism and help mitigate the things that sort of are the rapacious part of it? And every one of us has to make that decision. And I would admit it's a compromised decision, but one that I feel I can live with for the reasons I feel I can do good. And my presence, the presence of people like you and others, actually makes the system operate more virtuously. So
I just real quick, I hope that people replay what you just said. And Janet has said similar things over and over again. There's a choice to be made. And you have to go into these things with a degree of intention. And again, we were joking about nuance, right? It's not all good, all bad, or everything needs to change to kind of meet me where I am. You said, listen, there's some things that I love, some things that I'd love to see change, some compromises that I know I need to make. And so I really appreciate your articulation of that, because I think it's something so many folks that are struggling with some of this need to figure out, how do I come to grips with it as an individual?
Yeah. And it doesn't abdicate us from. It doesn't mean that we abdicate our responsibility to speak up when we see something unjust or not right and use our influence. So, but here's one way that I've helped some people help make this transition. And let me use a metaphor, because I'm talking about currency. So let me stay with the currency metaphor. So I'm from Lima, Peru. And the currency in my country is the sol, S-O-L. And so I can work in Peru, there's value to my work. I get compensated for it, and I get something of value that I can use to take care of my needs and all that. I get on the plane from Lima via Miami, end up in O'Hare. I'm jet-lagged a little bit, so I went on double shot espresso at the Starbucks by gate H5 on Terminal 3. And I show up and I ask for my double shot, and they give me, it's $5.34, and I give them soles. I cannot transact. Those soles have value to me. They have value in my country. They are a reflection of work that was converted into currency. But in this other economy, this other world, I cannot use it. I have to go to a currency exchange, change my soles, which have value, for the currency that I have can be usable here. So my analogy is the following. Most people in the D&I work are driven by social justice. That is for religious reasons, political reasons, philosophical reasons, personal value reasons. And nothing will take that away. That whatever social justice looks like for any one of us and how we express it and how we manifest it, it has value based on those belief systems and our commitments. But if we choose to go to that other country called corporate America or corporate global, and we try to transact in that corporation to do business and to do work and get things done with the currency of social justice, it doesn't work. That currency is just not lose value. We just have to convert it into the currency which is a for-profit vocabulary. But the driver underneath it and why we're there every day does not get lost.
My friend, wow. I am a person who appreciates a good metaphor, and that is chef's kiss. And, there are going to be a lot of people breaking that one out after having listened to this episode and say, wait a second, I'm trying to do business in this currency. You also sound like a man who has made that trip quite a few times, because you know where the Starbucks is and the terminal and all of it. But it is so well described. And I think that, and again, part of what Janet and I are constantly trying to do is help the folks that care about these things figure out, how do I build sustainability? How do I kind of move the needle? And I think this insight, I can almost hear minds unlocking to say, aha, I've been trying to conduct business in this currency. And then I'm upset when it doesn't have the same value in another environment. And I blame that other environment versus just thinking about how do I change that, right? It's still valuable. It still makes sense to me. But if I want a coffee over here, I need to do these things in order to make that happen.
Yeah. And let me
Love it.
land it too from a heart
You
perspective.
didn't land it already? I thought you already
No,
landed it.
from a heart perspective. I landed it from a transactional perspective, and I have business to do, and I got to, do it under the contract that I have, right, to operate effectively in that. But to land it back to the heart and to stay with my metaphor, I don't lose touch with my home base, which is my moral home base. I go back to Peru, right? I go back to social justice. And wherever it is that gets replenished, whether it's in church or the mosque or in a political rally or just among my friends, I have to get regrounded. I have to get touchstone, because if I stay too long in that other country transacting in a currency that is really not my original currency, then I'm going to lose myself and I'm going to lose my edge. So we are bicultural, multicultural people, multi-currency people, multi-world people. And yeah, go to the corporation, do the work, do the effect, transact, but then don't lose sight of your home base and get replenished every single time. Well, let's stay then on so what does it mean to transact with the currency of the corporation? And how does it stay a for-profit, right? But how does it stay in alignment with the overall objectives of what has been called D&I and whatever gets called now? And so let's talk about that. And Janet, you already were in that direction when you talked about the talent imperative, right? And it's like the talent is diverse. I don't care how you look at it. We are just in the U.S. and in other parts of the world, the workforce is diverse. So if you're going to talk about our greatest assets as our people, well, if you don't take care of your people, it's like, think about it. If you have attrition of 20, 30, 40% among certain demographic groups, and you're not taking care of that, as a business person, for-profit business person, it's the equivalent of saying, you know what? We have 40% inefficiencies on the assembly line. We have 30% defect on the product we're producing. And any CEO or any, general manager is going to say that is unacceptable. Using for-profit language, we got to maximize profit. We have to reduce losses. We have to make things more efficient. So the business person and the business mindset needs and must take heed that a certain parts of your organization in terms of your people, because of the demographics or their gender or whatever it case be, are really not as efficient, or there's more absenteeism, or there's less productivity, or there's less acceleration, or there's less innovation. That's a business issue. I can use the transaction, the currency of the corporation to have that conversation. I do not have to use social justice conversation to talk about how you have to tend to your people and make sure they're optimizing their performance and that you're getting your return on your investment because you're paying their salary, and their benefits. And then you're allowing the situation to just, deteriorate because they don't feel included and valued and respected and treated with kindness. Come on. This is a business conversation.
But that's where that logic always blips for me, because you're absolutely right. What you wouldn't want to have, you wouldn't mind 30% attrition of people that you don't value, okay? But you wouldn't want that of people who you believe value and bring profit and all that. Somehow, that logic gets twisted when we are talking about people who are other, whether it's gender, whether it's race, whether it's ability. Somehow, within even that logic, those people become expendable, because we wouldn't need D&I if there were not the fact that there are people that are more expendable than others. So, like, I always have my thing, and you know what I'm going back to. But the thing is, it defies logic. And so even when you say that, and it is a bad business decision, the question is, does it only become a bad business decision if certain people are the ones that are being lost?
Yeah, I spend probably 90% of my time in the C-suite globally. Yes, there's bad leaders, meaning not morally bad, but just bad business leaders because they're not making good business decisions for what variety of reasons. They're not tending to efficiency or not keeping up with technology, or to use your example, Janet, they're allowing the prejudices or the prejudices of others to deteriorate performance, and they're not paying attention to the impact on the bottom line. I get that. But I work with so many CEOs that actually don't fall into that trap. They go, my biggest investment is my people, and wherever they're underperforming, we pay a cost to our rewards, our stock price, our ability to invest. So, just try using straight out MBA formulas. Any place that you have inefficiencies, you have to zero in on it and say, what is the root cause? So I'm not saying there are not bad players there, either for moral reasons or just bad players just because they're not good business people. And there are plenty of not so good business leaders or mediocre ones. But there's so many that are good. And like if you make the case and show them the X and Y axis, right? And you show them the regression analysis and you go, this is what's costing billions of dollars, those leaders are going to pay attention to. But that's where the D&I practitioner or whatever they're called now can step in and have a business currency conversation that is going to make the business leaders pay attention. And is this bowing before the God of the almighty dollar? Well, flip it. The power of the argument for optimizing your talent and all this glorious diversity, and that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And to say what is good for the people is good for business. And you can do the financial analysis to show that over and over and over.
What does this mean for individuals? What does it mean that the system, that the trend that we were on is clearly reversing? You're in a different trend now. What does it mean for individuals? And what if you talk about the social justice, the capital, and using the right capital? Let's say I'm an individual contributor. I don't have any power. I don't even get a chance to have the discussion. So I certainly don't get a chance to use the right or the wrong currency. What does this mean for me? And what can I do about that right now?
Yeah, and I think this is a good way a good moment for me to rebalance what sounds like a very optimistic view of, what's in front of us. I just want to make sure what the case that I'm making is not like an easy one to just draw the wand and do a flip chart and go, there we go, right? You got to do your homework, and there's resistance and all that, and there's political headwinds. So, but there's ways that I feel we can address it. Now let's look at the underside of what's going on, and there's plenty of underside. It's hostile toward people who are different. Oh, it's hostile to things that sort of level the playing field, and it's hostile to data, and it's hostile to education. So many people, because of their race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and identity expression, disability, etc., the feeling of personal threat based on what's happening is very real. And I don't want to minimize that whatsoever. And by the way, there's also a place for corporations to play a role, because all of us who feel threatened in one way or another because of what's going on, those who are employed should be under the care of the corporation. Like the corporation should do what it can, right? And it has to mitigate its risks. But in the end, when I'm behind closed doors with leaders, I tell them, look, I know there's certain things you cannot do legally, programmatically, and this and that and the other. Fine, I understand. But every single day that you wake up and look in the mirror, think about your employees who, for various different reasons, today are waking up afraid, uncertain, confused, angry, depressed, because who they are is being attacked in the media and by certain elements of the government. What is your role as a leader? To show empathy and care for the people that are spending most of their waking hours in your organization. And it's a character conversation. And here's the thing, certain D&I programs have gone away because they're deemed illegal. a lot of these good leaders depended on those programs to give them the reminder, the oomph, the putting people in front of them to take care of. And I tell them, you won't have that anymore. Now it's up to you. Who are you spending your time with? Who are you nurturing? Who are you looking out for? Now it's up to you from the inside out. And it's actually tapping into their sense of rightness or social justice or values or religion or faith or philosophy, whatever it is, it's tapping into it. So rather than them depending from the outside in to give them a crutch, if you will, to do a D&I program, it's for them to say, who am I going to commit to on this day and every day to make sure that I am providing the opportunities that should be provided to those that have it.
But what does the individual do? Because that's what the leader does. Let's say you're that individual that maybe benefited from those programs at some point, and now those programs are gone. Well, what do I do?
You know, as someone who has been a former chief diversity officer and who loves programs, and I've seen the power of programs, there's no question. With the programs going away or being diminished or reduced in budget, as difficult as this is going to be to hear, it's not a nihilistic statement. It's going to be dependent more on you as an individual. You know, and we want, and it's hard because, the rising tide should lift all boats, and we like the rising tide and we go with it. But now, no, there's a Viktor Frankl statement, it's not the stimulus, it's a response. And so there's a lot of negative stimulus. But in the end, all of us will see the outcomes or not of our lives based on how we respond to the stimulus. Whether the stimulus is positive or neutral or really negative and destructive. In the end, there's a lot more inner power and self-agency in us than we realize. And so what would I say to the individual contributor? Yes, it's hard. It's ugly. It's scary, right? And these are the things you got to do to protect yourself. Yes. At the same time, here's the things that you need to do. If you succumb to despair, if you succumb just to pointing fingers to the real dangers and the real obstacles, but you're not looking inside to say, where is it that I can show more resilience and more courage, right? More initiative, then that's where you really get stuck. And this is a moment, an opportunity to draw from deeper, what we say in Spanish, ganas, the word that doesn't have much translation, but it's about digging as deep as you possibly can where you think you have nothing left and pulling it out. And the great stories of our time, of the heroes and heroines that we love, is about people who actually did that despite all odds. And we can start naming all these heroes, right? And heroines and sheroes. They all face obstacles of the worst possible kind. Viktor Frankl, the guy I just quoted, he survived a concentration camp. Right? And those that survived slavery and dogs sicked on them, and yet jailed, that Mandela for a few decades, and yet they rose above it. And so the middle career person might say, yeah, but I'm no Mandela, I'm no King, I'm no Gandhi. Yeah, but you are you, and in your world, whatever that circle is, 5 people, 10 people, 12 people, in your own circle as an individual, you have agency to rise up and meet the moment in the face of the challenges. And that's what I would say.
Okay.
Janet, I've known you not long enough to know, because it's interesting. And Andres, I think you do a really nice job of being honest about this isn't easy. And I think that for many of us, as I'm listening, I've often told my 2 boys and people that I've mentored at work and myself, the phrase that I utter more than anything else is 9 words. So what are you going to do about it? Because to your point, I can't control the stimulus. Again, for good, for better or worse, this person wants to sponsor you. So what are you going to do about it? This person doesn't like you. So what are you going to do about it? You just lost your job. So what are you going to do about it? And yet I also recognize, and Janet, you and I have talked about this as well, it's difficult to have to feel like you need to be the hero, right? That you work in this multi-billion-dollar organization that a while ago was telling you this is the most important work that anyone could possibly do, and we're going to put tens of millions of dollars behind it and hire a chief diversity officer, and all of this is super important. And then to your point, Andres, to turn around and have to say, okay, a bunch of that went away, so now I need to fill that gap. And so I see and live in both of those spaces of being incredibly disappointed sometimes in the institutions that have faltered under. And again, you look and you say, you're a CEO that makes $20 million a year and you can't stand up. You're a business that makes $5 billion, $10 billion, $100 billion a quarter, and you can't stand up. But I'm supposed to stand up. I'm just trying to put food on the table. I have 2 children at home that if I get fired, what do they do? So
Yeah.
tell me about that, because I think I absolutely
And
live
let's
in that
scale
space
it.
of, so what are you going to do
I
about it?
think we got to scale it. The CEO is going to have a different kind of responsibility on behalf of the enterprise. The entry-level, mid-level person doesn't have that responsibility for the enterprise. But that person is a member of a team. And what are they doing for their team members and on behalf of the team? That member has a family and has neighbors. What are they doing on behalf of them in their circle of influence? And the circle of influence could be 1 other person, 5 other people. That's the call. Where is it that can have influence? And am I stepping in, especially in a moment where everybody's scared and everybody's confused and everybody's overwhelmed? Wow, if every one of us can give a little bit of hope, a little bit of support, a little bit of kindness, a little bit of affirmation, a little bit of empathy to just 1, 2, 3 of those people that are really scared and hurting, and then you multiply that, that's where I think we have our call.
There you go.
So right now, if I was trying to figure out what I was going to do tomorrow, we talked about this a little bit in our input interview, where you said, in addition to being a hero, you have to take control of your own path. So what does that look like? Let's say the program that went away was professional development for women of color. That goes away. So does that mean that I no longer, well, they got rid of all the women of color too. So, but does that mean that goes away? I mean, so I'm suddenly now responsible for my own developmental path. And if I am, what am I supposed to do about that? Because I don't even know where to start. What do I do?
I mentor a lot of people and of all ages, high school kids, college kids, recent grads, mid-career, even those, peers. And what is the quality that they have? And notice the age difference. Every single one of them took the initiative to contact me. Said, there's something about you, Andres, that I like. I want to learn more from you. Can you mentor me? And I say to them, well, I'm happy to be available, but this is what I require from you. You got to tell me why. You're going to tell me what you're going to do with it. You have to be willing to initiate. I'm not going to initiate. I'm willing to meet with you, and I give them a frequency depending on the situation. But you reach out to my EA and you get it scheduled. 30 minutes, and then come ready with a problem you're trying to solve. And that's all I do. If I don't hear from them again, well, that's it. I don't chase them. And so every single one of the ones that I have in my mind as I went through that, they did all that. So that's what it looks like. And they reached out to me years ago. They reached out to me last week in the middle of all the crises. There are a lot of people like me and the 2 of you that are ready and willing to pay it forward. And we're all busy, but we're willing to do it. So you got to find those people and you got to put yourself out there. You got to make the ask, and then you have to then do your part and carry the water, because that mentor is the reason you're want to emulate them or learn from them is because they're successful, they're busy. So make it easy for them. But if you make it easy for them in terms of time and logistics and all that, and do your work, then they will open up their hearts to you.
Khalil, what's coming up for you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the perspective around individuals. I want to go back to something you and Janet were talking about in terms of the company as well. So for those companies that want to make the transition into more of an economic, a discussion, or those, DEI professionals, leaders, individual contributors, ERG leaders, whomever, are there things that they should be thinking about doing as soon as they're done listening or watching this podcast to say, okay, great, this is how I should think about making my argument, or this is who I should go to, or this is what I should be doing first? Are there any kind of thoughts or steps or best practices that you would kind of support those organizations and individuals with?
Yeah, and as I answer that, let me just make sure we have the 2 oars in the water in terms of the business imperative. We made the case for the last few minutes on the talent imperative, and it's a very powerful one. But we have to put the other oar in the water about the consumer or the market imperative. because in the same way the workforce is diverse every so is the marketplace. So coming back to your question, Khalil, is what can I do as I listen? Well, there's B2Bs and there's B2Cs and there's B2Gs out there. And so the answer is going to vary, right? Like the B2C often is the most easy, right? It's a consumer base and and you can ride the trends and get ahead of the trends and okay, great. But even on a B2C, put yourself in the shoes of how is it that my worldview, because I grew up different or outside in another country or in another set of contexts, right? How is it that that can really help increase, it's the C's, I'm sorry, in the B2B conversation. And it has to do not in a simplistic way that Latinos tend to like certain flavors or certain colors or okay, that's fine. But on a and on a B2B conversation, it's more about a worldview. Like, how is it that buyers from different countries and different cultures think about buying, and how do they establish trust and relationship, and how do they negotiate, right? And any seller will tell you all those things are really difficult, complex things. And if I am used to selling to people that look like me, fine. But if I had to extend to sell and negotiate and contract and make deals with people very different from me, I got to understand their worldview. So there's a lot of room for people who are different to offer those perspectives in a B2B environment as well.
Makes a lot of sense. I'll take it.
So Andres, we have gone, all over the place, and you started things and we took you in different paths. And we thank you because we think it's been a great conversation. You've given us a lot. You've given our listeners a lot to think about. With Khalil and I going back and forth, what is the one question that neither of us asked you that you would have liked for us to ask that you think can be valuable, that people should hear the answer to?
The question would be, what is the upside? Is there an upside to this crisis?
That's a damn good question. Go ahead.
I believe there is. Again, I'm not grateful for the crises and all the bad intent behind it. But, we have an expression in Spanish, a mal viento buena cara, to a bad wind, a good face, strong face. And so we can't choose the stimulus, but we could choose the response. And what is the upside that I see in this crisis is that those of us who have been in D&I for quite a while, which includes the two of you, we've always had a concern that we've had an Achilles heel. That, as much as the programs are getting funded, were they the right programs? Or maybe they're okay programs, but they really were falling short on achieving the stated objectives. D&I wasn't held accountable to the breakthrough results that we promised. So what is the upside? I think that the bad intended assault on D&I has inadvertently and unintentionally expose cracks in our foundation that were our own making. They've created their own smashing of the wall. But how is it that D&I sort of succumbed so quickly in the face of the assault? Why didn't it hold after a couple of generations of billions of dollars of investment? And I think that, some of the cracks in foundation, one was basing it on a different currency. That's one. But the other, I think we over-relied on programs to be the panacea for bringing us forth. I believe in programs, don't get me wrong. But the programs should be an enabler to something deeper and more structural and more strategic and more sustainable. Because programs always have a lifespan. That's part of the flavor of the month. Great program, great initiative, but then it always climaxes and always at the end of it's like a great book, and then it ends. And a great Netflix series, it ends. A program always ends, and it always starts with great fanfare and it's exciting, but it always ends. And I think one of our fallacies was to base D&I strategy on programs as opposed to basing D&I strategies on what will add value to the organization. And now I'm going broader, not just for profit, but to the nonprofit, for the government, for the educational system. Where is the D&I added literal value to the purpose of the organization? And I think the programs, as sexy as they are and as fun as they are, it was the wrong vehicle to ride to sustainability. Those are the igniters, they were the enablers, but not the thing. Right? And I think we confuse tactics for strategy. So I think that's another thing that was of our own making, not of the assault. And finally, I think that, and this is a tricky one to embrace, but I think if we're going to have a moment of reckoning, it is a good moment. What can we learn about us, despite, all of us go through some personal tragedy. We lose somebody we love, or somebody succumbs to dementia, and or you are in a mass shooting. And those three examples are for many, but they're my recent ones for the last 4 or 5 years. And so you look at the awfulness of it and the root causes of it. But in every one of the situations, I've looked in the mirror and said, okay, what am I learning, or what do I need to learn about myself here? What is my growth opportunity here? Right? And I think, what is the growth opportunity of those who have been in the D&I field this time? Where is it that we can not only shift the conversation or use different currency, but how can we reinvent the whole thing and go at it in a very different, innovative, disruptive way? And I think that's up to us, not to the CEOs, not to the heads of HR, right? And we just can't blame the other side for doing what they're doing. It's like, because there's an assault, we must reinvent ourselves. And I think one of the other cracks in our foundation that was of our own making is that we rested on our laurels. We got too complacent on the CEO statements of support and the big statement on the website and maybe the advertising, and failed to see that that was all nice and good and we like it. But we misunderstood that as being the thing. And we stopped being transformative and disruptive and innovative and pushing forward to the next thing. And one other thing I'll say is, did we inadvertently end up being not as inclusive as we needed to be? Did we leave some people out, different groups, as we pulled one way? And in the process, that could create resentment and a sense of, I'm not part of that conversation, and why not? And then in that, we did not make some friends.
I think that is I'm glad we ended on opportunity, because it does seem, it's a little scary out there right now. But I love the fact that there are things that we can do individually, the things that leaders can do, but that there's opportunity there. And I agree with you. That's the one thing I've said over and over again, that, as bad as it is, it allowed us to realize what we did wrong. And so, Khalil, to answer your question, what are you going to do about it? I think that is the question we all need to be asking ourselves.
And we don't want to leave the other side off the hook. So we got to gear up for that and address it. But I think in this kind of show, as we're trying to say, where is it that we can have the most influence right now, when the forces against this work is arrayed in a sort of blitzkrieg kind of way? There's a lot of things we can do that should give us hope and opportunity to move forward.
We'll end it there. Andres, thank you on behalf of the listeners and on behalf of Janet and I for an engaging, dynamic, and very thoughtful conversation. We look forward to pulling out a lot of these insights and continuing to highlight them on the website and in a lot of different materials. And I know folks will be rewinding, replaying, quoting, jotting things down, forwarding clips, and all of that to the people in their network. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, as we promised, I think that was a pretty interesting discussion. I know I enjoyed it. I have some new language to use and new things to talk about.
Yep. Well, speaking of language, I mean, obviously we talk about our 3 key takeaways after we walk away from every conversation. And I think in every interview we've said we got a lot more than 3 that we could take away. This one was no different, but let's anchor on a couple of these 3. So Janet, you spoke about having new language. And I think that, one of the first key takeaways is change the language, keep the work, right? The battle over traditional DEI language has maybe been lost. And Andres made that point, but workforce optimization continues under business performance frameworks. Same work, different words.
That's absolutely something I got from it. The other thing I got from it, the other key takeaway for me, is that business performance wins. And we talked about the fact that most of us are in the for-profit world. What matters is the bottom line, and business performance, that's what matters. So diversity, inclusion, and equity, we know that those are good for society. We know that. But they're also good for business. The trick is, using the right arguments at the right time in the right place so that we can actually deliver on that value and make it possible.
Now, Jenna, I'm going to say, you say that that's a key takeaway, but you've been talking about that for as long as I know you. So you were going to add that takeaway in there anyway.
Yeah, I was going to do that anyway.
You and Andres are super lined up. And listen, I named my book The Performance Culture for a reason, right? We know that these things line up. And so I could not agree with you more. And then one that jumped out to me and to us based on a question that you asked is this idea that individual responsibility rises, right? That traditional support systems are being removed in many instances. Professionals have to own their own career development and skill building and really support one another at the same time. But that individual responsibility, building expertise, expanding networks, driving business results, those fundamentals are still the same. How we get them done may have changed with some of the programs potentially going away or being less invested in.
And, to hear that just there, it kind of makes you go, what does that mean? But one of the things that I really heard too was the fact that where this challenges exist, there's also an opportunity. Now is the time we have an opportunity and a responsibility, I think, to change this game.
Well, let's keep changing the game, one episode at a time, and lots of practitioners out there getting insights and taking action.
Absolutely. So we'll keep doing that, and we will see you again soon. Thanks for joining us on In This Moment. Find today's resources at inthismoment.network and connect with us on LinkedIn. And if this was valuable, subscribe and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast. It helps other leaders find us. Stay ready for what's next.